Hi everyone, Jonathan here, content creator and owner of the YouTube channel Retro Vertigo. Over the last few weeks we've been doing videos over science fiction, horror movies, video games, and today I just wanted to do something slightly different and talk about another thing from my childhood which I still really like to this day, and I do feel just does not get the attention or appreciation that it's owed. So today I want to talk specifically about a Marvel UK character, and this character is one known by the name of Death's Head. Now before I do kick in, I just want to apologise in advance. I will be having a drink of alcohol whilst I'm on this video, but I will be smoking, which I am going to do in a moment. I'm only human, we have our vices. So anyway, Death's Head was a character created by Marvel UK in the year of 1987. He was originally created to be a one-off character appearing in the UK Transformers comic from around that time. Now a number of people will be thinking I've read the Transformers comics and I've never heard of this guy, so what is it that you're talking about? Let me explain. Back in the 80s, Marvel won the rights to develop and print a comic strip based upon the Hasbro cartoon and toy line of the Transformers. This led to the first few issues, I believe, featuring Spider-Man, just as a way of setting it up that it's Marvel's new big thing, and I believe he had a run-in with Megatron in one of the first few issues. After that appearance of Spider-Man, Marvel carried on printing the Transformers comics, but then never really involved any other Marvel characters because they wanted to set it up as its own separate thing. Now here in the United Kingdom, we did not always get the comics that Marvel America would print straight away. The Transformers is the perfect example of this. So in America, you had the comic that was printed for quite some time. I believe it may have been fortnightly initially upon release and then changed to monthly, or it might have been that it was actually printed monthly. Either way, that ran for a few issues, and then in the UK we got reprints of those stories. Now here in the United Kingdom, back in the day when we had reprints, it wouldn't be the case of we just get the American issues sent over from the States and resell them. Some instances that was the case, but what would happen a lot of times was they would get reprinted here in the UK and they would be in a much larger format, slightly bigger than A4 in size, a lot wider as well. So anyway, we've got the Transformers comic that we're reprinting from the American comic strips. As I say, I believe it was monthly in America at the time, and here in the UK it was actually being released fortnightly, like a lot of other comics specifically made in the UK were at that time. This led to the issue being where the UK was quickly going to catch up with the United States comic, and then if it didn't change the way in which it was printed or released, it was quickly going to run out of content and be waiting for the next issue of America to print theirs so it could be printed, or should I say reprinted, here in the UK. Now I believe they did not want to do that because the sales for the Transformers comic at the time, and Transformers at the time overall, was a big franchise. If you're making money off something every 2 weeks, why would you want to change to monthly and lose half of that income? So what happened was, a group of writers and artists were brought in specifically to start creating their own Transformers UK storylines that would be printed in the comics whilst waiting for the American content to be printed so we could catch up. Now that in itself sounds very confusing, because if you've got a comic that's being printed in America, being written by American artists, script writers, etc., and then some guys from the UK are just going to start writing their own, they're gonna cross paths, or they're gonna conflict. You don't know what Americans are planning with their version to what us in the UK are planning. So they had to find a ground where they knew the American comics weren't going to touch, and that's where the animated 1980s Transformer movie comes into play. The American comics were still sticking with the original toy line. Optimus Prime was the leader. You had Megatron that was still in the comics, and they hadn't really touched on or introduced any of the new characters that came around from the animated movie, such as Rodimus Prime, Corp, Springer, Ultra Magnus, Cyclonus, Scourge, Unicron, etc. So Marvel UK saw this as the perfect way of creating new storylines with characters they knew the American comics weren't going to touch for quite some time. But how would you do this? So there was a comic strip that was released, I believe it was called Target 2010, which was the first official Transformers UK written and drawn comic. Now this was set in the 80s and 90s once again, and it was still Optimus Prime and Megatron. But what happened was it followed on from the events straight at the end of the Transformers animated movie. So at the end of the Transformers animated movie, Rodimus Prime has thrown Galvatron into space, Unicron has been destroyed, and that's setting up season 3. What you don't see happen, and this is what the Marvel UK writers introduced, was that when Galvatron was thrown into space, he had a time displacement unit with him. And he comes up with the plan of travelling back in time to the 80s, 90s, when it is still Megatron, when it is still Optimus Prime, and he's going to build a weapon on Earth that is going to destroy Unicron years before the events of the movie occur. They run with this comic strip, they created other ones that followed on from this, but this in itself set up how Transformers UK could run its own material without conflicting from those from the United States. Jump forward a few issues in the Transformers UK comic, and it was issue 113 where the character of Deathshead was first introduced. It's set after the events of the animated movie. Rodimus Prime has had enough and he places a bounty for Galvatron's head, which goes out into space and is seen by various bounty hunters. This then lands in a bar where our character Deathshead is drinking and sees this, and straight away he's thinking, I want a piece of this action. Now Deathshead, although a bounty hunter, would prefer the term a freelance peacekeeping agent. Don't ever call him a bounty hunter to his face, because that will not work out well for you. So as I say, he's been created specifically as a bounty hunter, chasing down Galvatron. He has run-ins with Cyclonus and Scourge. He has run-ins with Wreck-Gar, the Junkions, Rodimus Prime, and even a couple of other instances that lead to him being the cause of the death for Bumblebee and also Shockwave. I'm not going to go into any more spoilers around the character there, but you've got an idea of what was happening. Now, this character became more popular than what was originally intended, and Marvel UK quickly realised that because they'd created this character in the Transformers universe as part of the Transformers comic, they quickly needed something to do to remove him from the Transformers comic so they could create his own series and make him a Marvel main character instead, or Marvel made, should I say. This led to the printing of a one-page comic strip called High Noon Tex, I believe. This was printed in various Marvel comics around that time, and the idea of it was to prove that this character is Marvel and not one that's purely made for Transformers. So he's originally started in the Transformers universe. He ends up moving from universe to universe to universe. He has a run-in with Doctor Who in one comic. This leads to him actually being shrunken down in size, because obviously when he's in the Transformers universe, he's full size with the full strength and abilities of that of a Transformer. He can't transform, but when I say abilities, I mean like strength and powers, etc. So he has a run-in with Doctor Who. Doctor Who shrinks him down to normal human size. He then gets transferred again from universe to universe, and he finally ends up with his own Marvel UK comic. The first issue of this, I believe, was printed here in the UK in November of 1988. It ran for 10 issues, and I want to say the first issue was something silly like 75 pence. At the time, that may have seemed quite a bit, but if you think about that now, 75p for a comic, it's not going to happen with inflation, costs, etc. So Death's Head ran for 10 issues. From that, the last issue was set, I believe, in the year 2035, where he had a run-in with the Iron Man of that time, and I believe he was a descendant of Tony Stark. So that's where the comic ended. Following on from that, the Death's Head character would later reappear in one-off appearances in She-Hulk. I believe he'd also, as I mentioned, appeared in an issue of the Fantastic Four and various other one-off cameo appearances. It was from this that not long after the character unfortunately did start to die out. His popularity wasn't as big, I believe, in America as it was here in the UK, which then would later lead to a rebranding. Now, I'm not going to cover that right here and right now, but I will be moving on after to discuss that. So if this is something of interest to you, then please do let me know in the comments below. I haven't gone into too much detail as I don't want to ruin the character if it's something that you've never heard of. There is a lot more backstory to the character than what I've covered today, and his backstory wasn't fully explored until years after his original concept and release. I believe the reason for this was because when Simon Furman first created the character, it was intended, with all purposes, to be a one-off, specifically for the Transformers UK comic run. But due to popularity, quickly needed to become its own self-contained comic and entity, and it wasn't until years later his backstory and origins were fully explored. Without going into spoilers, I can mention the name of the book, however, and that would be a graphic novel that is known as Death's Head, the Body in Question. But anyway, I digress, and I don't want to go into too much detail, as I said. Next video, we will be looking at Death's Head 2, the reincarnation or reboot that they did years later. This is where things get really, really mad. If they aren't mad already with how many different franchises and characters he's already ran into. But anyway, if that's something that you would like to see, please let me know in the comments below. If you know Death's Head and you like the character, please let me know and spread the word. But anyway, thank you all for checking this out with me today. Hopefully catch you all soon. Ciao.